The first time my daughter called me crying, she was 9 years old and she'd fallen off her bike outside the church on Elm Street. The second time, she was 31, standing in the parking lot of a restaurant she'd built from nothing, watching a locksmith change the locks on a door with her name still on the lease. I want you to sit with that for a second, because everything I did after that phone call, I did without raising my voice one time. Welcome back. If you're watching tonight, do me a favor and tell me where you're tuning in from. I like knowing who's sitting with me for this one. And if you believe family is supposed to protect you, not use you, go ahead and subscribe before we get started. You're going to want to see how this one ends. My daughter's name is Emily. Before I tell you what her father-in-law did to her, I need you to understand who Emily actually is, because that's the part that matters most. Emily was the kind of kid who saved her allowance for 2 years to buy her little brother a bicycle when his got stolen outside the community center. She never told him where it came from. I only found out because the shop owner mentioned it to me at the hardware store, almost like it was nothing. To Emily, it was nothing. That's always been the way she's built. She's the one who drives 45 minutes on her one day off to sit with her grandmother at Brookdale, not because anyone's checking, but because she knows the staff turnover means fewer visitors remember to come. She trained every single line cook at her restaurant herself, on her own time, off the clock, because she wanted them to actually understand the food, not just follow a laminated card. My name is Harold Pruitt. I'm 62 years old. I spent 29 years as a union electrician here in Scranton, Pennsylvania, before my knees gave out and I moved into inspection work, which is a nicer way of saying I sit in an office now and sign off on other men's wiring. I've been married to the same woman, Carol, for 36 years. I've got a bad hip, a decent set of hands, and one flaw I'm not proud of admitting to you tonight. I believed that giving my daughter room to build her own life meant staying out of it entirely. I thought silence was respect. I was wrong about that, and it took what happened next to teach me different. 4 years ago, Emily married a good man named Daniel Kessler. Daniel is steady, kind, a little quiet, the kind of husband who remembers what pharmacy she likes and drives the extra 10 minutes to it. His father is a man named Roger Kessler, and Roger owns 3 restaurants across the Poconos under a company called Kessler Hospitality Group. When Emily and Daniel got engaged, Roger offered her the head chef position at his newest location, a farm-to-table place out on Route 6 called the Mill House. I remember thinking it was a gift. I didn't understand yet what that gift was going to cost her. Roger Kessler doesn't yell. I want to be clear about that up front, because it would be easy for you to picture some red-faced restaurant tyrant slamming pans. He isn't that. Roger is smooth. He wears a navy blazer to every service, even when he's not cooking a single plate. He calls every employee by name and asks about their kids and remembers their birthdays. And for a long time, I thought that made him a good man. It doesn't. It just means he's careful. That carefulness, I'd come to learn, was the most dangerous thing about him. It was a Thursday, the 11th of June. I remember because I'd just finished signing off on a panel inspection out in Dunmore, and I was sitting in my truck eating a sandwich when my daughter's name came up on my phone. I almost let it go to voicemail. Instead, I picked up, expecting her to ask what time we were coming for dinner Sunday. Instead, I heard her crying. Not upset crying, the kind of crying where the words come out broken in the middle. My daughter, who hadn't cried in front of me since she was maybe 14, was standing outside her own restaurant. "Dad," she said. "Dad, I need you to come down here." "Emily, where are you?" "I'm at the Mill House." "Dad, they're changing the locks." Roger had them change the locks on me. I sat there for a second with the truck idling in the gravel lot, watching a hawk circle over the tree line, completely indifferent to the fact that 30 feet from me, my daughter's whole world was coming apart in her hand. "I'm coming," I told her. "Don't sign anything. Don't say anything to anybody until I get there. Not one word." Here's what I learned over the next several hours, piece by piece, sitting with her at my kitchen table while Carol made coffee. Neither of us drank. 2 weeks earlier, Roger's accountant had flagged a shortage in the Mill House's liquor inventory, somewhere around $6,000 over 3 months. Instead of calling Emily, instead of pulling the delivery logs himself, instead of doing what any reasonable business partner does when there's a question about money, Roger went straight to his general manager, a man named Kurt Pemberton, and told him to handle it quietly. I want you to notice that phrase. Handle it quietly. Not find out what happened. Handle it. By the time Emily got to the restaurant that afternoon for the dinner shift, she wasn't an employee anymore. She wasn't even a partner, which is what everyone had always called her, even though her name had never actually made it onto the LLC paperwork, something Roger's lawyer had been still finalizing for 4 years running. I called Roger myself that evening from my driveway, phone in one hand, the other pressed flat against the porch railing to keep myself steady. Roger, it's Harold. I need you to tell me what happened to my daughter's restaurant. His voice came through smooth and unbothered, like we were discussing the weather forecast for the weekend. There's a shortage, Harold. $6,000. I have to protect the business. She built that business, Roger. She's there 60 hours a week. You think she's stealing liquor from her own restaurant? I think, he said. The numbers don't lie. She'll have every chance to explain herself once counsel reviews it. You had the locks changed before you even asked her a single question. There was a pause, and then he said the line, I will not forget as long as I live. This isn't personal, Harold. It's business. She should have read the partnership terms more carefully before she agreed to them. Then he hung up. Not a slam. Just the soft click of a man ending a call he considered finished. Somehow that quiet was worse than shouting would have been. While all this was happening, there was one person at the mill house who refused to stay quiet about it. Her name is Odessa Marsh. She's 54. She's run the front of house since the doors opened, and she's outlasted 3 general managers and 1 divorce. Hers, not Roger's. Odessa drove straight to my house that night, without being asked by anybody. She sat with Emily at my kitchen table and held her hand, and kept saying the same 4 words, over and over, like a promise. This isn't over, sweetheart. Odessa also happened to be the one person who still had access to the old vendor portal, the one Roger's accountant hadn't gotten around to locking her out of yet. And she happened to notice something Kurt Pemberton had missed entirely. The liquor distributor had switched delivery drivers 8 weeks earlier, and the new driver's manifests didn't match what was actually being signed for at the loading dock. She printed 6 weeks of delivery records on her own time and handed them to Emily without telling a soul. I didn't do anything with what I knew right away. I want to be honest with you about that part. I let it sit. I watched my daughter sleep on our guest room bed for 4 nights because she couldn't stand walking back into the apartment she and Daniel shared, not with Daniel's own father, the one who'd done this to her. I watched Daniel, torn clean in half between his wife and his father, barely eating at our table on Sunday. I didn't decide what I was going to do yet. I just let it sit there, cold, and I waited. I want to tell you what that waiting felt like, because it wasn't rage. Rage burns hot, and it burns out fast, and I've felt that kind before, plenty of times in 29 years, running electrical crews with men who didn't always want to listen to safety protocol. This was different. This sat in my chest quiet, and it didn't move. 5 nights after that phone call, I sat alone in my garage with a cup of coffee gone cold on the workbench, and I made a decision. I wasn't angry anymore. I was finished being patient. See, there's something about Roger Kessler that nobody in that family knew, not Daniel, not Emily, not even Carol until I told her that night. 14 years ago, before Daniel had ever met Emily, before any of these people had heard my name outside of a job site, Kessler Hospitality nearly went under. Roger had one restaurant then, a diner really, and a bad walk-in freezer that failed during a July heat wave and cost him half his inventory 2 weeks before he was supposed to close on the loan for a second location. The bank he'd applied to turned him down flat. A man I used to do electrical work for, a private investor named Sal Fiorenza, who ran a small commercial lending outfit out of Scranton, heard about it through the local contractors network and structured a private note to keep Roger's second location alive. Sal didn't do restaurant work. He needed somebody who understood the physical build-out, the code requirements, the electrical load calculations for commercial kitchen equipment, to co-sign the technical viability of the deal and hold a small piece of the note alongside him as security. That somebody was me. Nothing with my name on any signage, nothing anybody would ever notice. Just a line in a loan file, buried under Sal's name, the way I liked it. Quiet. never needing credit for it. That note carried a covenant, standard boilerplate language that Sal's attorney had written into every deal he did, the kind of clause nobody reads twice after signing. Any material adverse action taken against a partner or key employee with an equity interest, without documented independent review, resulting in reputational or operational harm to the business, would constitute a default event, giving the note holders the right to assume interim control of company assets and accounts. Roger Kessler never knew who actually held that piece of paper alongside Sal. He'd paid it down faithfully for 14 years, refinanced portions of it twice, never missed a payment. He had no idea that the man who told his daughter-in-law to read her partnership terms more carefully had, sitting quiet in a filing cabinet in my den, the one document that could end his control of everything he'd built. I called Sal the next morning at 7:30, before he'd even had his coffee. I gave him one instruction. Pull the Kessler note. Confirm the default language still holds. And Sal, I want this done exactly by the book. Nothing bent. I want it airtight. Sal was 71 years old by then, mostly retired, but he still had the same attorney, a sharp woman named Priya Anand, who'd handled his lending work for 2 decades. She started building the filing that same afternoon. 3 days went by while Priya put it together. During that stretch, I watched Roger's business attorney start calling Emily's employment lawyer, the one Odessa had helped her find. First it was once, then it was 3 times in a day. Then by that Friday it was 9 calls in a single afternoon. They didn't know why yet. They just knew something had shifted somewhere they couldn't see, and the shortage story was starting to smell wrong from every angle. By the following Tuesday, the calls between Kessler Hospitality's counsel and the liquor distributor's regional office had climbed from 9 to 19. The delivery manifest discrepancy had been formally documented and handed over. The new driver, it turned out, had been shorting 3 different restaurant accounts across the region and pocketing the difference through a side arrangement with a bar in Scranton that wasn't even one of Roger's locations. Roger had no idea any of that mattered anymore, because he had no idea what was coming from a direction he'd never once considered. 26. That's how many calls it took before Roger's own accountant quietly came to him and admitted the shortage had nothing to do with Emily at all. 26 calls, and not one of them was mine. I walked into Roger Kessler's office at the Mill House on a Wednesday afternoon, the 2nd of July, at 4 o'clock, with Sal Fiorenza beside me carrying a manila folder, because I wanted Roger to see the man behind the money, not just hear a name. Roger looked up from his desk, mildly irritated, like I was there about a parking complaint. "Harold," he said, "I don't have a lot of time today." "You're going to make time," I said. I sat down without being invited. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. 14 years ago, this business was 6 weeks from losing its second location. A man kept you afloat when the bank wouldn't. That man is sitting right here. I nodded toward Sal. I was the second name on that note. Quiet, the whole time. Never asked for a thing. Something behind Roger's eyes went very still. "The covenant in that note," I said, "gives the holders the right to assume interim control if the company takes material action against a partner without independent review. You changed the locks on my daughter over a shortage you never verified, based on an accusation your own general manager never actually investigated, and you did it because you never wanted her running this kitchen in the first place. That's a default event, Roger." He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then, quietly, "You're bluffing." Sal opened the folder and slid the documents across the desk. I watched Roger's hands, a man who'd built 3 restaurants with those hands, start to tremble slightly as he read. "Effective this morning," I said, "the note holders have exercised their right under the covenant. Operating accounts across all 3 locations are frozen pending independent review. Kurt Pemberton is terminated, effective immediately, for failing to conduct a basic investigation before taking action against an employee. Your attorney's already been notified that Emily's name will be added to the Millhouse's LLC paperwork this week, retroactive to the date she was promised it 4 years ago. I'm not interested in taking your restaurants from you, Roger. I'm interested in making sure nobody in this family ever does to my daughter what you just did." He looked up at me, and for the first time since I'd known him, His voice cracked at the edges. "She's my son's wife." "She was your son's wife when you had the locks changed on her too," I said. "That didn't seem to slow you down then." I stood up. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Watching a careful man finally lose his composure was payment enough for me. The vendor investigation was closed within the month, and the distributor fired the driver responsible and reimbursed all 3 locations in full. Emily's name went onto the LLC papers, with a partnership stake that finally matched the 60-hour weeks she'd been putting in for 4 years. Odessa was promoted to general manager across all 3 restaurants, a job she'd earned a decade before anyone thought to hand it to her. Roger stayed on as majority owner, but with an independent operations board now reviewing any personnel action against a partner before it can happen, something Priya insisted on in writing. And to his credit, I'll give him this much. He drove out to Emily and Daniel's place on a Sunday evening in August, sat on their back steps, and apologized. Not perfectly, not with everything I would have wanted him to say, but he said it, and he said it to her face, not through a lawyer. I drove home that night with the windows down, warm summer air coming through, an old Merle Haggard song playing low on the radio. I thought about all those years I told myself that staying out of my kids' business was the same thing as loving them well. It isn't. Sometimes loving somebody means stepping in front of them, quietly, and taking care of what they never asked you to take care of. My daughter is doing well now. She and Daniel are looking at a piece of land out past Clark Summit for a place of their own someday. Odessa still calls me every year on the anniversary of the day the locks got changed, just to say things are good. And every so often, I think about that covenant, sitting quiet in a filing cabinet for 14 years, waiting for the one afternoon it would matter more than anything else I ever signed my name next to. If this story meant something to you tonight, if somebody ever stepped up quietly for you when you needed it most, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button, and leave me a comment telling me about the person in your life who showed up when it counted. That's what this channel is all about. I'll see you in the next one.